So some of the other puzzle pieces, we have a slide that's showing you basic self-care is really important. So sleep and nutrition and exercise are really important for anyone with an ADHD brain. They're important for all of us, but they're even more important when there's a difference in the brain and when we're trying to improve the brain.
Correct.
Then we need to improve things like sleep and exercise and nutrition. So I wanted to mention real quick for sleep, if you think about even someone without ADHD, when they don't get enough sleep, it's going to cause ADHD-like symptoms, right? You're going to have trouble focusing. You're going to be more off task. You're going to forget things more.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And in kids, they get hyperactive, right? They get very kind of like they are overtired and they start just running all over the place. So it can start to look like ADHD. So if you think about if you have an ADHD brain and then you don't get enough sleep, it's even worse. So
the
it's
challenge there,
important.
And Lindsay, the challenge there that I see, even as a mom of a child with attention deficit, to help us understand that is when a child has attention deficit, the brain doesn't turn off.
Right.
I mean, they're constantly, even when they're trying to get to sleep, you'll see them thinking. So
it's a chicken and egg problem, right?
Yeah. So what comes first, right? So maybe there's some rituals that you can start with them. Maybe have them take a warm bath, or
this is why routine and structure is really, really important for kids with ADHD. Yes. So they need to follow the same routine every night. They need to follow some of the same, like you said, bedtime rituals and patterns. And you can talk to your pediatrician or talk to a therapist or a psychologist, and they can give you lots of recommendations.
There's some great ones.
Because there are some things that can really help. And you're right, kids with ADHD, they struggle with just winding down for the night and getting to sleep. And so it's something to make sure that you're addressing if you haven't, and if it is a problem. Nutrition, what I wanted to say about that is that high protein foods actually stimulate the brain. So that is another way that you can go in and work on turning the switch on. You can make sure you're giving your kids high protein foods, especially in the morning for breakfast and for snacks throughout the day. They really may need to have some extra snacks because it helps wake the brain up, and make sure that when you're giving it to them, you're giving them something that is going to help and not hurt. So
sugar is probably not the best one to give them.
No, because then you're going to get the highs and the lows, and it's not going to help stabilize things.
Yeah, you'll see them really energized for about a short-lived 10 minutes, and then all of a sudden they crash because of the sugar. So.
Exactly. And so the protein is what we have found has been extremely beneficial. Omega-3, there's research also showing some benefits of omega-3 supplements or foods that are high in omega-3 because those stimulate brain development and brain growth. So that's going to be something that is just helpful to include. Kids with ADHD really are particularly sensitive to the foods that they eat and to sleep.
Oh my goodness,
and to exercise. This is why we're bringing these up as something to think about. And exercise we have to talk about because it's really important. So just movement in general. We have a slide showing you the brain and what happens when you exercise. And it does what we want it to do. It goes in and it wakes up the brain, it stimulates it and turns the switch on. So for kids who need that switch to be turned on, exercise is really important. And it doesn't have to be like serious, intense exercise every day. It just needs to be movement. They just need to move. And so if they are moving and they're fidgeting and they're wiggling and they're getting out of their seat, that's because they're telling you they need to move. Their body needs to move so their brain can stay alert. So find ways to allow them to move and rather than stopping them from moving. So sometimes our instinct is just to say, sit still, stop doing that, stop tapping your pencil, stop wiggling your foot, stay in your seat. And we really need to be a little more flexible and let them move if they need to move. So we actually have some things to kind of show you. There's all kinds of fidget toys. Everyone's seen the fidget spinners, but there's also fidget cubes.
There's a putty that you can mess with. They have a band that you can put on the
legs of the chair, and they can bounce their feet on the band. There are wiggle cushions that go in the seat, and a lot of kids love those. We have them in my office, and they love them. There's seats the chair will wiggle and move. Some kids like to stand while they're working, and that's okay. They can stand, or they can go to the back of the room, and they can pace if they need to.
Right.
And these are things that you can work with the schools and with their teachers to allow some of this type of movement, but of course at home. At home, you have
Absolutely.
control, so you can allow this as much as you need to at home.
Again, as a mom of a high schooler, mind you,
Mm-hmm.
when she comes home, she crashes because she has worked so hard to
Oh
stay
my gosh, yes.
on task and to focus and this is a high schooler, this is an
Yeah.
elementary kiddo, but they work so
Yeah.
hard that
All
when they come
day,
home, it's like,
yeah. It's exhausting
It's
for
exhausting.
them. Yeah.
So-
yeah. So another thing to think about then is structuring their evening in a way that works for them. So when they get home from school, it may not be that moment that they're going to be able to sit down and do homework, right?
Right.
They need to move first. Let them get some of their wiggles out, we call it, and let them have a snack. Let them do some things that will stimulate their brain and get them back on track, and then maybe start homework.
And while we're on that subject, since we talked about nutrition and food, if they are on medication and they lose their appetite or don't want to eat, then maybe that's the time to give them that snack after school, so at least they're eating something once the medication starts to wear off.
Right,
So-
that's very true. So we have a slide with several more pieces of that puzzle that we're talking about, and so we'll just run through each of them really
Yeah.
briefly. Behavior therapy is something that can be really helpful in teaching a child skills and helping them practice those skills. And that actually forms new connections and growth in the brain. So, and you're creating new habits for them. So that can be a really helpful thing. Occupational therapy is another
Without a
thing.
doubt.
For a lot of kids, it can be helpful because occupational therapists can focus on some of the sensory issues that we're not even getting into right now, but there are a lot of sensory issues that can relate to ADHD,
Right.
and they can address some of those. They can also address some coordination issues that some kids may struggle with. A lot of kids with ADHD tend to be accident prone. That's something that I see all the time. And so that's something that occupational therapists can work on, just that awareness and that coordination. ADHD coaching is something that's becoming more and more available and more common, but the idea behind it is having somebody that you meet with on a regular basis to check in with and hold you accountable, and they work on things like organizational skills, time management, setting goals, planning.
Certain charts, things like that.
Yeah, and that can be really helpful, especially even for teens and for adults with
Absolutely.
ADHD, because you just need the extra support. You need somebody that's kind of providing that structure that your brain is not always providing for you. Cognitive skills
Oh, yeah.
training, so that's another really big one. And there are a couple of cognitive skills that are affected in kids with ADHD, and through that training, you can improve those skills. Things like processing speed, memory,
Well,
attention.
we talked about divided and selective attention, and there's some exercises. I know we do that
Yeah.
at our center that help with the
Can you show your cards?
cognitive weakness. Sure, the cognitive weaknesses that affect attention. So, for example, here's one that we do at our school, where we'll show a card. They have to look at it for 3 seconds or 3 beats, and then we turn it away, and they have to remember what number was in whichever color. And
With
we'll
that
go
number.
from there.
Mhm.
Yeah, we'll go from there. We can make it much more
There's a lot of
complicated or
ways
more
you can do it,
challenges.
right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
But the idea is just practicing those cognitive skills. It's like working out a muscle. Your brain is a muscle, and the more you work it out, the more it develops and improves. And so you can improve those skills by practicing.
and the one beautiful thing about, you mentioned a muscle, but the one beautiful thing about cognitive skills that is different than a muscle is that when you exercise, that's elasticity.
Yeah.
So if you don't work it out, you kind of tend to lose it.
Bounces back.
Right,
yeah.
kind of bounces back.
Mhm.
With the brain and cognitive skills, there's plasticity.
Plasticity.
So once you work it out, it kind of stays that way. So
Yeah.
that's really good too, and real important.
Very hopeful. Yes.
Absolutely.
I want to mention mindfulness as another piece of that puzzle. I highly recommend just learning more about it. There's lots of good books on mindfulness. There's
Excellent.
books for kids. There's activities for kids teaching mindfulness. And it is such a great skill for kids who have ADHD, because the whole point of it is learning how to focus your attention on the present moment, which means focusing on what's going on inside and outside your body, using all of your senses, focusing on your surroundings. So kids with ADHD, this is such a good skill. The more they practice it, the more they can learn to control that attention that we talked about earlier. They have such a hard time shifting it and controlling it, and they can practice that and get better at it. So mindfulness is a great thing to look into. The last one we have was in the environment, and this is a really big one. Just creating an environment that is the best fit for your child.
Conducive, yeah.
Yeah, just think about all the things your child needs and how you can set things up in a way that works best for their brain. So structure is huge. Lots and lots of structure. Making sure you have a schedule and a routine, doing the same thing so that they get into that pattern, and keeping things visual. So hanging up, signs, labeling things, using calendars, planners as they get older.
You'll need to guide them too, because they just don't, they can be scatterbrained and they tend to forget things. So maybe remind them the night before, hey, tomorrow you've got this and this and this. Where is it? Let's put it near the door.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of things. One thing I want to touch on with the environment with the school, at least it's statistically proven that those fluorescent lights are really bad for kiddos, especially with attention deficit. And at least at our school, we have the soft lighting, and it really does make a difference. That kind of soft, quiet mood, soft music in the background.
Low stimulation.
Exactly. If you can possibly have different, like you mentioned, like different seating, or where they can stand up, or there's a little trampoline you may have in your house, or anything that can help them.
Like flexibility to me is important in that environment. Making sure that you're not trying to fit them into that box and making every kid do the same thing. They need to have a little wiggle room, because one child may need that flexible seating,
Right.
and another child may be able to sit fine in a typical chair. And so I think it's just being a little bit flexible.
I agree. And you can truly do it without being too distracting to the rest of the kiddos. You really can.
That's true. Also, removing distractions. So if you're thinking about homework time or the classroom environment, the lighting can be a distraction, but also other noises. If you can find a way to remove distractions, don't set them in front of the TV to do their homework. Make sure they're in a environment that works best for them. And some kids, by the way, and adults, do better with some background noise.
I was going to say, I'm actually the opposite.
Well, as long as it's background noise.
Right,
this is what I've learned, is that some kids, if they get pulled into it and engaged in what's going on the television or on the radio, then it's going to distract them. But if it's background noise, it can be very helpful, because for some kids, silence can be a problem, because they will notice every little noise, and the background noise will kind of drown things out. Yes. So I have a lot of teen students that like to work at coffee shops, or places where there is some background noise going on, or they like to keep headphones on and listen to music while they're working. For these kids, you have to listen to them. Find out what do they say works best, and try it out. Just be open-minded and give it a try, because it really may work for them.
And I will tell you, again, just working with these kids, I'm so sorry. It seems sometimes like they're not paying attention. It seems sometimes like they are distracted or daydreaming. Mm-hmm. I promise you, they're taking everything in. All of a sudden, an hour later, they'll come to you and go, hey, you said blah, blah. And you're like, wait, you weren't even listening to me. You were doodling or whatever. That's just their way. So if they doodle, that's okay. That's their way of, If it's not harming you, and they're doing well and they're getting their good grades, that may just be how they learn.
Yeah. Well, think about this. If they're putting all their energy into trying to be still and not move and do what you're wanting them to do, then that doesn't leave much energy for them to actually focus and learn, right? So you need to figure out what helps them focus. If it is doodling or fidgeting or standing at the back of the room or listening to music, whatever it is, then that's what works for them, and that's okay.
So in conclusion, is that ADHD, it can actually be a blessing, and you can use those strengths to be something absolutely amazing. So we thank you guys for joining in. We look forward to seeing you next time. Any that you want to mention?
Well, thank you guys so much. We appreciate you listening, and we're looking forward to hearing if you have questions.
All right, take care.